You're about to step into a place on Earth that feels like it should be sterile, crushed by pressure, baked by heat, starved of sunlight. And yet, it's alive. Not as a metaphor. Not as a poetic idea. Alive as in metabolizing, repairing, persisting. So here's the question that will not let go. If life can run in total darkness, powered by rock itself, how many dead worlds have we misjudged? We're standing at the mouth of a mine, and the air has that metallic, damp chill that feels older than weather. The elevator cage waits like a ribcage made of steel, functional, indifferent, honest about what it's built for. We step in. The gate clatters shut. The operator nods, and gravity becomes a collaborator. The descent begins. At first, there's still a sense of the surface in your body, like your lungs are holding on to the memory of open sky. Then the shaft walls start to slide past us like a slow-motion eclipse. Rock replaces horizon. Darkness replaces distance. Your headlamp sweeps across the mine wall and catches glittering flecks, minerals flashing back at you like frozen lightning trapped inside stone. The temperature climbs in a way you don't notice until you do. It's not a sudden heat. It's a gradual insistence. A reminder that Earth is not a cold ball with a warm blanket of sunlight. Earth is warm from the inside. And that thought, simple, physical, sets the hook deep. If the planet is warm from within, if water can seep into fractures, if chemistry can keep shifting, why would we assume life must cling to the surface like moss on a stone? Listen to your own pulse for a second. Down here it gets loud, like your body is trying to reassure you that you're still in charge. But you're not fully in charge anymore. Earth is. The rock is. The pressure is. And then the realization arrives with a weird emotional weight. The planet under your shoes is not inert. It's active. Not just tectonics, biology. A biosphere beneath the biosphere. This is where we start the audit. Tonight, we're not doing the inspirational version of science where everything is tidy and ends with a single triumphant graph. We're doing the uncomfortable version, where the first job is to doubt our own hands, our own tools, our own contamination. Because the claim we're investigating is big enough to deserve suspicion. Here's the claim: Earth's most resilient life doesn't primarily live on the surface. It lives inside the planet, inside rock, inside fractures, inside deep sediments, sometimes miles down. And if that's true, then the universe may be full of life that our telescopes will never see, not because it isn't there, but because it's hidden the same way. So what are the rules of this audit? 3 things. First, evidence has to be physical, measured, replicated, constrained. Not vibes. Not wishful thinking. Second, contamination control. Because if we drill into the earth and bring up a core sample, the easiest thing to find is us, our skin cells, our microbes, our drilling fluids, our lab air. Third, energy accounting. Life is not a magical property. It's a process. Processes need a budget. If there's life down there, we should be able to trace its income, where the power comes from, and how little it can live on. And right now, in this descending cage, you can feel the stakes in your body, darkness pressing in, heat blooming out of the rock, the claustrophobic truth that sunlight is not a law of nature, it's just a local convenience. The elevator slows. The gate opens. We step out into a tunnel where the air is warm and heavy, and the walls sweat mineral water. There's a smell down here that's not earthy, like soil. It's sharper, like wet stone and iron, like chemistry. Now imagine you're holding a piece of rock that hasn't seen daylight in, what, tens of millions of years? Hundreds? It's been sealed, stressed, fractured, healed, fractured again. It's been part of Earth's deep breathing. And then someone splits it open. This is where the story shifts from eerie to destabilizing, because the first clue in the deep biosphere wasn't philosophical. It was empirical. A core sample comes up from a borehole, ancient rock, freshly cut. Clean in a way that feels almost disrespectful, like we've opened a letter that wasn't addressed to us. The lab work starts. Microscopy. Chemical assays. DNA extraction attempts so careful they feel like surgery. Isotopes, those subtle fingerprints in carbon and sulfur that can tell you whether a molecule was shaped by geology or by metabolism. And then the results land. Biology. Not fossils. Not a dead imprint. Metabolism, ongoing chemistry with direction. A pattern of isotopes that looks like something took carbon and made choices with it. Cells and fractures. Microbes and sediments. Life in places that, by the surface story we tell ourselves, should be empty. If you're feeling a little resistance right now, good. Keep it. Because we found microbes underground. Sounds almost too easy. Like it should have been obvious. But it wasn't obvious. Historically, for a deep human reason, we used sunlight as a proxy for life because sunlight is what shaped our imagination. We looked at Earth and concluded, without saying it out loud, that the sun is the engine and life is the exhaust. Green plants capture photons, build sugar, and everything else, us included, lives off the trickle-down economy of photosynthesis. And that's mostly true at the surface. But deep underground, the sun is gone. So if life is there, it has to be living off a different kind of engine, an engine you can't see with your eyes, only with your ledger. So let's rebuild our mental model, together, right here in the tunnel. What does life need? If you strip away the poetry, life needs three things: energy, chemistry, and time. That's it. Energy is the ability to make something happen, like lifting a weight. Chemistry is the inventory: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, metals. Time is the patience to let slow processes accumulate into complexity. Notice what's missing from that list: sunlight, air, comfort, familiarity. On the surface, we confuse habitable with pleasant for humans. But microbes don't care about our comfort. They care about gradients. A gradient is just an imbalance. Think of it like a hill. If you put a ball on a hill, it wants to roll downhill. That want is energy. In chemistry, the hill is a difference in electron availability. One molecule eager to give electrons, another eager to take them. When electrons flow from donor to acceptor, energy is released, and life can harvest it like a tiny turbine. Down here, food isn't a leaf or a shrimp. Food is a chemical mismatch. So when someone asks, "How do you eat a planet?" the answer is, you eat the gradients that the planet naturally creates. There's a term for this style of living: chemolithography. Let me translate that without making it feel like a vocabulary test. Chemo means chemical. Litho means rock. Trophy means feeding. It's life that feeds on chemical energy sourced from rock and minerals, rather than light. Imagine a city that runs not on solar panels, but on the voltage difference between two buried wires. That's chemolithography. Invisible infrastructure. Real power. Now the immediate question, because it's the question that decides whether this whole story is plausible, is, where does the voltage come from? Where does the deep earth get the ability to keep paying life's energy bills? Two big sources show up again and again, like recurring characters in this underground drama. First, water-rock reactions. Water is not just a passive fluid. Under the right conditions, it's a reactant. It wedges into minerals, rearranges them, and in the process, it can generate hydrogen gas, H2. Hydrogen, down here, is currency. Not metaphorically, chemically. Many deep microbes treat hydrogen the way you treat money, a flexible, spendable resource that can buy them the work of metabolism. One of the most famous water-rock reactions is serpentinization. Picture certain rocks from Earth's mantle, rich in iron and magnesium, meeting water. The minerals transform. The rock changes its identity. Heat is released. Hydrogen is generated. It's like the planet is quietly charging batteries in the dark. Second, radiolysis. This one feels almost like science fiction until you realize it's happening under your feet right now. Natural radioactivity in rocks, uranium, thorium, potassium, emits radiation that can split water molecules. The water breaks apart into reactive fragments. Hydrogen forms. Oxidants form. And suddenly you have, again, that crucial thing, a gradient. A battery. So the deep biosphere can run on water that has been cracked apart by either chemistry or radiation, and on minerals that can trade electrons like a bustling market. Now, what do microbes actually do with that? They run metabolisms that sound alien until you remember they're just electron trades. Sulfate reduction, for example. If sulfate is available, some microbes can use it as an electron acceptor, producing sulfide. That's a kind of breathing, just not with oxygen. Iron reduction. Some microbes take iron in a higher oxidation state and reduce it, changing its electron count, like a biological blacksmith reshaping metal at the atomic level. Methanogenesis. Certain archaea, life forms that are not bacteria, not us, but ancient branches of life, can combine hydrogen and carbon dioxide and produce methane, CH4. It's metabolism with a signature you can measure. And now you can feel the plot thickening, because methane isn't just an Earth thing. Methane shows up on Mars in puzzling bursts. Methane is discussed in the context of icy moons. And here we are, in a mine on Earth, watching a mechanism that can create methane with no sunlight at all. But before we sprint to aliens, we have to understand the tempo of this world. Because the deep biosphere doesn't live like we live. It doesn't even live like surface microbes in a pond. On the surface, life sprints. Nutrients pulse. Seasons change. Predators chase. Plants bloom and die. A bacterium might double in minutes when food is rich. Down here, life whispers. Picture a candle burning so slowly you can't see the flame move, but it's still burning. That's the deep biosphere's metabolic style. Cells can survive on energy budgets so small they feel like rounding error, so small that if you're used to thinking of life as constant growth, you'll mistake it for dead matter. So what are they doing all that time? Sometimes they're dormant, paused, waiting. Sometimes they're active in a minimal way, repairing DNA, maintaining membranes, keeping their internal chemistry from sliding into chaos. There's a concept scientists use here: maintenance energy. The minimum energy needed to simply not fall apart. Think of an old cabin in winter. If you don't heat it, pipes freeze, wood cracks, mold grows. You don't have to renovate the cabin to keep it standing, you just have to spend enough energy to prevent ruin. That's maintenance energy. And the boundary question, the one that makes philosophers and biochemists both lean in, is this: if a microbe divides once in a century, what does alive even mean? Is it alive because it's doing chemistry? Or is it alive because it's sustaining itself against decay? Because it has a kind of stubbornness, a directional persistence? That question matters, not just emotionally, but operationally, because when we search for life elsewhere, we might find a system that barely changes over human timescales. We might call it dead simply because it refuses to perform on our schedule. Now let's bring in a motif, because I want you to feel how modern this story is. Above us, the calendar says January 2026. People are making resolutions, buying planners, promising themselves new habits. Down here, the calendar is geology. Rock doesn't care about our new year. It measures time in pressure cycles, in slow heating, in fractures opening and sealing. But we're opening a fresh ledger anyway. Because the way we truly understand the deep biosphere is not by romance, but by accounting. We ask, how much energy is available in these environments? How much biomass, how much living material, could that energy support? How much is actually there? This is what scientists call an energy-limited biosphere. Not a biosphere limited by space. Not by water alone. Limited by the rate at which usable energy is produced, and the rate at which life spends it just to remain life. And that ledger forces discipline. It stops us from declaring miracles. It also stops us from underestimating the possible. Because once you accept that life can run at a whisper, you start to see how a planet can host an enormous amount of life simply by having enormous volume. The biomass in any given handful of deep rock might be tiny. But the total habitat, fractures, pores, sediments across continents and under oceans, is vast. Now, this is the point where a careful mind should get nervous. Because how do we know any of this life is truly from down there? How do we know we didn't bring it with us? This is the contamination problem, and it is not a footnote. It is the dragon guarding the entrance to this entire field. Imagine drilling fluid rushing down a borehole like a bloodstream we injected into the planet. That fluid can carry microbes from the surface. Even if you sterilize equipment, Even if you wear gloves, even if you work clean, life is opportunistic, and our presence is messy. So the deeper we go, the more we have to doubt our own footprints. How do scientists fight that? They use tracers, substances added to drilling fluids that act like dye in water. If tracer shows up inside the core sample where it shouldn't, the sample might be compromised. They flame sterilize, they use sterile liners, they sample interior rock away from the edges that touch drilling fluid. They compare multiple independent signals. And crucially, they don't rely on DNA alone. Because DNA can drift. DNA can persist. DNA can be contamination. They look for in situ chemistry, conditions in the rock and water that would support certain metabolisms. They look at isotopic ratios, carbon-13 to carbon-12 sulfur isotopes, that carry the signature of biological preference. Life, when it eats, often chooses slightly lighter isotopes because they're easier to process. It's subtle. It's like a microscopic thumb on the scale. But in aggregate, over time, it becomes a fingerprint. So the audit demands converging evidence. Not one instrument. Not one paper. A pattern that holds when you try to break it. Now, with that caution in place, we can look back at the core mystery and feel its full weight. We have life living in rock fractures. We have life living in deep sediments under the seafloor, discovered through ocean drilling projects that brought up layers like time capsules. We have mines where microbes appear in water that has been isolated for geological times, and their metabolisms match the chemistry available there. So yes, deep life is real. The question becomes, what kind of reality is it? Because it forces us to confront the definition problem. When you and I say, alive, we often mean energetic, responsive, growing, moving. But the deep biosphere is the opposite of flashy. It's persistence without performance. So let's slow down and stress test our instincts. Imagine a microbe in a pore space the size of a dust mote. It has just enough water to keep its chemistry from freezing into place. It has access to a trickle of hydrogen produced by radiolysis, water split by the faint, steady radiation of surrounding rock. It doesn't divide today. It doesn't divide this year. It might not divide for decades. But it repairs. It maintains its membrane. It keeps a gradient across that membrane, the tiny voltage that makes biology possible. That membrane gradient is everything. If you want a metaphor, the cell membrane is like the wall of a dam. On one side, there are more protons than the other, more positive charge. That difference is stored energy. The cell lets protons flow back through molecular turbines, enzymes like ADP synthase, and uses that flow to make ADP, the universal energy token of life. So alive is not moving. Alive is maintaining a dam in a storm of entropy. Now, here's the uncomfortable twist. Chemistry alone can sometimes build structures that look lifelike. Crystals grow. Reaction networks cycle. So where is the line? When does a rock's chemistry become a living system? Scientists approach this by looking for sustained disequilibria, persistent imbalances that shouldn't exist if everything were simply drifting toward equilibrium. Life is a professional at keeping things out of balance, because it lives on the slope of that imbalance. If the deep biosphere is truly alive, it should show ongoing consumption of certain chemicals, ongoing production of others, and patterns that can't be explained by abiotic, non-living, chemistry alone. And that takes us to the heart of the energy audit. We follow the numbers. Not hope. Not fear. We trace the power. Picture a fracture network in rock like a set of veins. Water moves through it slowly, sometimes only when pressure shifts. Minerals line the walls. Radiation quietly splits water molecules in the background. Hydrogen accumulates in tiny pockets. Oxidants appear. Iron changes oxidation state. Sulfate arrives from ancient seawater trapped long ago or from mineral dissolution. And in that world, microbes are not finding food the way animals do. They are plugging into redox couples. Redox is just shorthand for reduction and oxidation, electron giving and electron taking. If you want a clean image, think of an ecosystem as a circuit. Electron donors are the negative terminal. Electron acceptors are the positive terminal. Life is the wire that connects them, and metabolism is the current. And now the rock itself becomes the power plant. Radiolysis supplies hydrogen and oxidants. Serpentinization supplies hydrogen and heat. Other mineral reactions supply iron and sulfur transformations. Carbon dioxide, CO2, can be stitched into organic molecules. Not by leaf chlorophyll, but by metabolic pathways that are ancient, arguably older than photosynthesis. So when someone says, "Life needs sunlight," the deep biosphere responds with a quiet correction: life needs a gradient. Now, if you've been tracking this, your mind is probably leaping ahead to the obvious implication. If Earth can host life without sunlight, powered by geology, then habitability is not a surface property. It's an interior property. It's a property of energy flow. And that's where the story turns, because we're about to have the moment where the map flips upside down. We're walking deeper into the tunnel. The headlamp beam trembles slightly with each step, and every time it catches the rock face, you see microfractures branching like capillaries. Veins. And then it hits, not as a sentence, but as a shift in perception. A planet doesn't need to be Earth-like at the surface. It needs to be Earth-like where energy flows. Suddenly, dead worlds become quiet worlds. Worlds that don't shout with forests and oxygen and visible weather, but may hum with subterranean chemistry, slow metabolisms, and biospheres that never see a sunrise. That is the eureka. And now we have to be responsible with it. Because if we're going to carry this insight into astrobiology, the search for life beyond Earth, we have to turn it into testable hypotheses. So let's climb out of the mind for a moment in our imagination and look up at the sky with new eyes. Mars. The surface is cold, dry, irradiated. It looks hostile, and it is. But beneath the surface, there may be brines, salty water that stays liquid at lower temperatures. There may be aquifers. There may be chemical gradients generated by rock-water interactions. Europa. An ocean world wrapped in ice, kneaded by tidal forces from Jupiter. Pressure below, ice above, and in the middle, a global ocean in darkness. If hydrothermal activity exists on the seafloor, if water meets rock, then serpentinization-like reactions could generate hydrogen. And hydrogen could bankroll metabolism. Enceladus. A small moon with an ocean that announces itself dramatically, spraying plumes of salt water into space like the moon is exhaling. Those plumes are not just beautiful. They're samples delivered to orbit. Now, if Earth's deep biosphere teaches us anything, it's that the best places to look for alien life may not be landscapes. They may be plumbing. Fractures. Plumes. Subsurface interfaces where rock meets water and gradients are continuously regenerated. So what do we measure? We measure hydrogen, H2, because it's often a primary fuel. We measure methane, CH4, but not just its presence. Its patterns. Is it seasonal? Is it correlated with certain minerals? What are its isotopic ratios? Because biology and geology can both make methane, but they often leave different isotopic fingerprints. We look for redox disequilibria, coexisting chemicals that shouldn't be stable together unless something keeps producing them. We look for chemical gradients that persist. And we stay humble, because Earth has shown us how easily we can mistake invisible for absent. Now bring it back home, because the deepest lesson here is not only about aliens. It's about us. We built our cities on the surface. We evolved under sunlight. We tell our stories under open sky. So we assume the surface is where life belongs. But the surface may be the loud skin of a much larger living system. When scientists estimate the biomass of the deep biosphere, the numbers come with uncertainty, big uncertainty, because sampling is hard, and the underground is vast. But even conservative estimates suggest something profound. A significant fraction of Earth's microbial life may live beneath the surface, in sediments and crust. Life not as a thin green film, but as a volume. And that should change the way you feel about the ground beneath you. Because when you walk across a sidewalk, you're not walking over dead stone. You're walking over a slow, hidden ecology that may be older than many surface ecosystems, and more resilient to catastrophes that would sterilize the open air. Mass extinctions scorch the surface. Ice ages freeze it. Asteroid impacts set it on fire. But deep below, the temperature barely flinches. The chemistry continues. The gradients keep regenerating. The deep biosphere is a kind of continuity, Earth's long memory. Now, if you're feeling that strange combination of awe and discomfort, good. That's the honest emotional signature of learning something real. Because this story humbles us in two directions at once. It humbles our sense of uniqueness, because life may be easier to sustain than we imagined, if you have water and energy and time. And it humbles our sense of perception, because we might be surrounded by living systems we don't notice simply because they don't look like our definition of alive. So let's make a vow, because it's January 2026 in our motif, and vows are what humans do when they want to carry knowledge into behavior. Here's the vow: stop equating life with familiarity. Audit planets and ecosystems by energy, chemistry, and time, not by comfort. Not by whether you can imagine yourself standing there without a suit. Redefine Earth-like. Not just Earth on the outside. Earth on the inside. And with that vow comes a reality model stress test. What if habitability isn't a binary, habitable versus uninhabitable, but a spectrum? On one end, lush surface worlds with thick atmospheres and sunlight-driven biospheres. On the other, quiet worlds with hidden aquifers and rock-powered metabolisms. If that's true, then the universe could be full of ecosystems that never produce a blue planet photo op. They would never paint oxygen across the sky. They would never grow forests. They would never build anything you could see from a telescope. But they would be alive. Now I want to leave you with a thought experiment that you can't unfeel once it lands. Imagine you are a microbe born in rock. Not a visitor. Not a surface organism that fell down a crack. Born there. Your entire universe is pore space, mineral walls, slow water, and chemical gradients like faint weather. Sunlight wouldn't be missing. It wouldn't exist. The idea of a sunrise would be as meaningless as the idea of smelling a color. Now ask yourself, how many alien biospheres are invisible to us simply because we keep searching for our own reflection? That's the epistemic limitation, the trap of detection bias. We look for what we know. We build instruments to catch familiar signals. And we might be walking past life's quieter signatures every time we point our gaze only at the surface. So here's the synthesis, the distilled truth of what we've uncovered in the dark. Earth hosts a deep biosphere. Microbial life living in fractures, rocks, and sediments, sustained not by sunlight but by chemical energy. That energy comes from the planet itself, water-rock reactions like serpentinization, and radiolysis from natural radioactivity. These systems run slowly, often at the edge of what we'd intuitively call alive, but they persist. And that persistence flips habitability inside out. The question is no longer, is the surface friendly? The question becomes, is there a stable place where energy flows, chemistry cycles, and time is abundant? Now carry that into your own life for a moment. If Earth can host vast living systems in silence and darkness, then maybe the most important parts of reality are not the loud ones. Maybe they're the slow ones, the processes we overlook because they don't announce themselves. And the next great question, the one that opens the next door, is this. If life can thrive without sunlight, and time can stretch metabolism into whispers, what else have we misclassified as empty, simply because it doesn't speak our language? If you want to keep going with me, there's a video on the end screen that takes this way of thinking and pushes it into a different frontier. Watch that next so the momentum doesn't break. And if you're new here, subscribe to the Science Audit if you want rigorous, evidence-first journeys that don't just tell you what's true, they show you how we know. One question for you, and I really want a simple, honest answer. If we discovered microbial life deep under Mars tomorrow, would you call that alien life? Or would it feel like an extension of Earth's story? Why?